Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to bring straight ahead to the stage Madam Graça Machel, and also on the stage, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Victoria Kwakwa, Regional Vice President for Eastern and Southern Africa of the World Bank. They're going to lead us onto a discussion on how to accelerate investment in Africa's human capital as our future depends on it. Karibu sana.
Fortunately, had the privilege of meeting her earlier this year when I visited Mozambique. And we had a very interesting conversation. And what really struck me was her passion, her commitment, and her total dedication to the issues around young people coming into their own, achieving all that they can be, and particularly young women and girls. So today, Graça, I'm really honored to spend a few minutes with you and to have a chat. I think Graça is such a celebrated woman. I want to spend a few minutes to say a little bit about her. With your permission, Graça. Graça Machel is the co-founder and deputy chair of the Elders. I'll be brief. I'm not going to read everything. She's also the founder of the Graça Machel Trust and the Foundation for Community Development. Her decades-long professional and public life is rooted in Mozambique's struggle for independence and international advocacy for women and children's rights. She's a former freedom fighter in Mozambique's Frelimo movement and was the country's first minister of education. In the years following her tenure in government, Graça produced a groundbreaking UNICEF report, The Impact of Armed Conflict on Children, that changed the way the UN and member states respond in conflict zones. And since then, she has worked tirelessly in support of global health, child welfare, and women's rights and empowerment. I see that you're distinctly uncomfortable, so I'll stop here. But just wanted to say a little bit about Graça as we go into this conversation. Now, we don't have a lot of time, so Graça, I think a lot of people would be keen to know a little bit about you. I've said a bit, but just on a more personal level, you know, you've dedicated your life to the issues around children and youth, and particularly women and girls. So if you could just tell us a little bit about what led you to this path and what kept you in this area of work.
Thank you, Victoria. As you quite rightly put it, I'm a freedom fighter. And that experience in my early age has molded in me the belief that if there is something you are particularly concerned with and you want to transform, you have to fight for it. When I joined the struggle, like many millions, not millions, thousands of Mozambicans, we knew that perhaps we could die during the struggle. But we were determined to do because we believed we want to be free. At the age of 29, immediately after our independence, I was deployed to the Ministry of Education. I was 29. I had no experience whatsoever, but I had to figure out how do I contribute for my country to have a system, a national system of education which could be grounded and rooted in Mozambican needs and which would help also to shape our future. Girls are not all in school. Girls are not getting the best of results. Girls are still given away in child marriage. Girls, so I believe I can't rest while even after 40 years of my life, while the millions of girls still are facing the same problems which I learned of the time I became minister. You want to understand why I'm here?
Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much, Graça. It's not finished yet.
Yeah.
It continues.
Yeah.
And the fire is still burning in you. Thank you. So, given that, as you said, there's still a lot to do, what would be your take? And you've been in this field, as you said, over 40 years.
We need to be able to see the future we want. We have to dream. We need to be able to see the future we want. We have to dream. We have to be much more ambitious. And we have to transform our ambition into plans which comes from the best of achievements and how we come back to say, from now, this is what we are to do if we are to reach that best of our achievement. I'll be a little bit long here. First, I listened to our discussions this morning. We have been doing a lot. There is real commitment to provide whatever we can define, and particularly in this issue of human capital. But I think with modesty, I would say to my ministers and to my heads of state, remember, there are still 98 million African children who are out of school. We were told here that out of 10 children, 9 of those who are in school are able to read and understand a text. We were told here in the discussions we had that any success we can think of, we need to develop those kind of partnerships, which will enhance what governments do, but has to bring the best of all members of society to feel the responsibility of really giving the best we have to give to our children. So my submission is the following. Can you please look back of these 98 million who are out of school? How many are in each one of our countries here? So we are doing the best we can, but we still have a few million who are out. How can we bring them in? Because our commitment is for every single child, girl and boy. How do we bring them all in? Second, once they're into the system, how do we make sure that all of them, they meet the KPIs? I'm using your language. They meet the KPIs which have been established from primary. And from primary, they have to transition to secondary. For them to have at least, this is what the rest of the world is doing, to have at least 12 years of education, of quality education. how many teachers we would need, how many classrooms we would need, how many schools, how many vets, how many universities, all those, to put it in a package, which becomes a social contract, a social pact. It's not only government alone. Is to get all our nation to say, if we are to do this together, this is what government has to do. Private sector, research institutions, civil society organizations, and then I'll come back to you as development partners. But to engage everyone, to say this is what we have to do. And let me remind you, many countries which are successful today, it took them only 30 years to move from poor countries and to become developed. 30 years. So let's give ourselves 30 years as a target. What it is we have to do if in 30 years we will not have one single child out of school. In 30 years, all our children and all our young people will have the knowledge, will have the skills, and they will have even the values, the soft skills, the values, which they will commit to give to society. And this, it's a huge challenge, but it's possible. Other people have done it. So what it takes, what will be necessary if we are to, in 30 years, achieve this? This would be my challenge to all of us. So that in 30 years' time, we are not to continue to be the continent which is the worst in all social indicators, whatever you want as a social indicator. Africa is the worst. We have to revert this. And we have to have the capacity to reverse it. And we have to have the means and the resources to reverse it. But it takes the ambition, and it takes really the commitment and the determination to do whatever it takes so that we get there. So that's my challenge when I sit here. I won't be there in 30 years' time. But I don't want my grandchildren to continue, which I say my grandchildren, who are your children because you are all younger than me, your children, to live in a society where in 30 years' time we'll continue to be talking about the same issues, we're exactly in the same level. No, no, no. For me, the commitment we have to make is we can do it, we must do it, we have to commit to achieve that. 30 years, it's one generation. Africa has to be different. And we made that commitment here in Dar es Salaam. In Dar es Salaam, today. That's one. Now, because I have to leave, I know. I'm looking at Victoria. Thank you for being behind this event. You represent development partners, if we call you. We call you development partners. But in fact, it's that language which we don't want to talk about of donors, right? You have a very important role to play. And I want to speak of the bank, particularly. What the bank put in our budgets, it's not a grant. It is a loan, right? Generally speaking, we are going to pay you, and you want us to pay you. Can you take the long-term perspective and say, we are going to invest with you, to invest, and I'm saying invest with you. During this generation, I'm talking about over 30 years, which means you have to be creative in the way you put that money. It's not only to say it's about money. It's about the future of all of us. So perhaps we should ask them, taking a long-term perspective, instead of us, all of us here, we have debt already, which is very heavy on us. And it's at the same bank. So we have to tell them, okay, can you please defer this for a certain period of time so that the resources we are going to mobilize will go strictly. We promise you that those resources, instead of paying you, will be putting into human development. And this will allow us to pull together our internal resources and the resources we should be paying you, we put and we increase for the human development we're talking about. And then 10, 15 years from now, instead of putting these very heavy interest rates on us, we will be able then to pay you back, but not in this interest rate. Because these interest rates are simply killing us. We have to have this discussion with the bank, with all other development partners. I want to finalize saying the following. It's not right that we will continue giving away our resources, which the developed world need the resources which are African. The resources, as we speak, are mostly on this continent than in Europe or anywhere else. So we need to negotiate in a basis in which there is really mutual benefit. And to say, we invest here. My president from Kenya was talking about, all this value chain and employment, etc., etc. Why on earth all the resources, most of the resources which are being dug down in our continent are manufactured in another site, not here? Let's negotiate. My president have to take that initiative. Ministers are here. Yes, we will take technology, we'll take investment, but let's transform an African soil so that our young people will get the skills, and we will have also the revenues which we need to pay for our human development. I think it is our responsibility, but the bank has to look at the issue of debt. And the development partners, whoever they are, they have to look at us as really partners. We give, we take. Not only to take from us most of our resources, we are impoverished and we continue to be the least development. We are always the worst in the social indicators. So, 30 years from now, this continent can, this continent can be a developed one. We can be the example of South Korea. Sure. Exactly. And they don't even have the resources which Africa has. But we're able, precisely investing in human capital, they were able to move from a poor country, and today they are giving money to other countries in form of contribution to development. So, I started by saying, I've been in these discussions. I have been Minister of Education 40 years back, for goodness sake, in 30 years to come, what we owe to our children and what we owe to our founding fathers is exactly to be much more ambitious, much more transformative, much more determined, much more creative, and in scope, in scale, in sustainability of investment. I'm sure we can do it. I'm sure we can do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Graça. I think you said a lot. Maybe just a final question, because time is fast spent. If you can just tell us, I mean, it's been 40 years, you've been in this, you continue, you're not giving up yet, and you say we can. Just tell me 2 things that really give you a sense that this is possible. 2 things. So what would you say the 1 or 2 things that give you hope and keep you going?
Things which keep me going
On this
on this issue.
trajectory.
I have already mentioned. I just can't stand that particularly children, and amongst children, girls, they continue to suffer what I learned as I started. I learned 40 years, and now I'm in my 70s, and the situation has not changed dramatically. It has changed somehow, but it didn't change radically. And this creates in me the sense of, I can't tolerate injustice. So that's the second thing. I can't tolerate injustice. And because I feel this is not right, this is not fair, this is not like African children have to have the less of what other children in other parts of the world have.
Good.
And this, for me, it's the motivation for me to say, wherever I am, and with a very little of my contribution, I have to carry on. I can't sit at home, sleep peacefully, while this type of injustices continue. And this is what keeps me going.
Thank you.
But I think this is perhaps which I would like to share with all of us, is you are all much younger than me. You are my children. And some of those who are sitting here are my grandchildren. Look, this continent doesn't deserve this. Our people don't deserve this. This sense of injustice should motivate us to transform radically. We talked about systems here, the systems of education. Some of our countries are still managing the system of education they inherited from the colony. They never had a deep and complete, reforming of the education system to say what are our needs as a nation, and to say what our children need to learn, and how our children are going to stand here, proud of being Africans, using African resources, using African brains, how they are going to stand equal, and if necessary, better than other children in the world. My goodness, this is what keeps me going. It hurts, but at the same time, I know it is possible. So because you have much more knowledge than I had when I was 29 and I went to the ministry, you have much more resources than what we have in Mozambique at that time, for instance. The world has changed, and we have knowledge, science, technology, communication. We have everything which can accelerate. That is the thing I'm trying to transmit, that, look, Africans were not born to live and die poor. Africans are not born to live and die in this situation where we are. It is, and now I'll use words of someone who is my friend, and they are using his quotes there. He said, it is in your hands. And then now I'll say, it is in our hands. We can transform this. And we must transform this. And we have to raise the ambition, the capacity to do it. And yes, we can.
Thank you. Graça, I hear the applause. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, we can. And it's our collective responsibility. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. What I took away is we need to be bold, to think long term, and to be deliberate in planning and then putting in place and implementing what needs to happen. So thank you so much for sharing this insight. I wish we could have longer to chat, but I think you've been very clear. And that all of us have a collective responsibility. Of course, governments lead, but it's not just governments. It's all of us in our individual capacities, whether we're parents, whether we're students, whether we're civil society actors, whether we're in the education sector and other related sectors. So if it works, it's because all of us pull together and make it work. And work with governments to deliver what we all want. Graça, with your permission, if I can just say one word about the World Bank interest rates, because I think it's important to note that a considerable amount of the support that we give in Africa is pure grants.
It's pure grants.
So they're not paid back. They're countries that just get entirely 100% grants. And then with the credits, they're extremely low interest rates for the majority, and they're really long-term loans, so 30, 40, even 50-year loans. But I think the points that you made are well taken. You're talking about having affordable financing to do what needs to be done. Yeah. And I think that's a very important point.
Thank you so much. To know that the head department in the World Bank is giving money as grants, and the grants in long-term perspective. But she represents the bank, isn't it? There is another pocket of the bank which is at our neck in terms of debt, isn't it? And that alone, it reduces the ability of national resources to be invested, the majority of our resources to invest in human capital. So thank you for doing your part. But for us to do our part, the other pocket of the bank has to change the way it deals with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Graça.